But okay, so this is called denting the walls and finding my backbone. My experience at the Winnipeg Art Gallery by Cathy Mattes. So this is a basically first-hand account of the author's experience at the Winnipeg Art Gallery as a curator in residence. So he was at this institution where this person who is Indigenous experienced a lot of really difficult issues. So the thesis here might be something like Indigenous artists and art workers continue to thrive despite historical exclusion on the part of the gallery institution. Or maybe something more confrontational, like the Winnipeg Art Gallery is an exclusionary institution that won't provide funding for Indigenous artists and curators despite being faced with the truth via an Indigenous curator or a position. But the goal of this person was to connect with the Indigenous community and to try and bring them into the gallery, which has this history of exclusion, by basically indigenizing the institution itself. So they were going to meet with a lot of different organizations, and they were trying to do tours and hold events and basically find a lot of different ways of including and like promoting Indigenous artists and have this kind of programming ongoing for the institution. So its goal, I guess, that goal was to change the direction of the gallery to be more inclusive in those areas. So this person really overextended, or I would say put her everything into this goal. They did years worth of work in a very short period of time, and kept hitting brick walls. For instance, like a new position came up for curator of contemporary art and photo, and excuse me, despite her being an intern and doing all this volunteer work on the side of the expected tasks, she wasn't even interviewed for the position. So this is something that we've read about before, and it's like it's Indigenous people and people of color and marginalized people tend to take on that responsibility and educate the non-Indigenous person almost in have a willingness to do this sort of thing. So it's a method of sharing that I think that when you feel like somebody might want to genuinely know something about you or your culture, you might want to share. And this might be like a natural reaction to share, but it's actually a method of extraction on the part of the institution that was displayed throughout the article. So, and she kept reiterating, you know, like that if they just saw her worth as a Indigenous curator, that that they would just eventually come to have this realization that you know, this could benefit their institution, or so. And there was like this, and she sort of like hinted at this naivety on her part, just coming out of university, and maybe they were younger and less experienced. But I think, like, if you also are the type of person, like, I think anybody could find themselves in this position at any time if you're the type of person that has Indigenous values of respect and responsibility and reciprocity. So I think that by her saying that, you know, she was naive, I think this also could have been a way of knowing that doesn't really work within a Western way of knowing that would be in the institution itself. So afterwards, they're in reflection, they're talking about all these things that they learned through their experience that benefited them, but the fact that the gallery never really made this commitment, and at the end of their residency, she noted that they hired they hired for a position that hadn't been filled in over a decade. And that kind of highlighted the fact that the Winnipeg Art Gallery's position on Indigenous artists, or further on Canada's history with Indigenous people, was one of exclusion. So, or is one of exclusion, really. So their priorities were more in line with placating Indigenous people as tokens to appear inclusive to outsiders or guests, while maintaining the power within, which is overall from what I've learned through even my past of course, in critical museology tends to be white and male, so and they don't really want to change in that power, so they want exhibitions about a culture but not for a culture, and that's noted in the article. And further to that, and this is also mentioned in the article, placing Aboriginal art at the National Gallery of Canada. The introduction of Indigenous objects does little to question the aesthetic assumption that of the art museum, which still frames all work within terms of Western conceptions of artistic value. So when you think about things like board membership and the people that work within the institution, they're working within a Eurocentric system and placing objects within that system of power. So they don't really want a disruption to that kind of, they don't want like to a reimagining of the museum or gallery that in these ways that Mattes was hoping for. For instance, like an Indigenous curatorial position. That would significantly disrupt the power base itself. So, in this reflection, she also talks about like how this created a more resilient curator and person overall, and said that they felt that although they were silenced by the Winnipeg Art Gallery, it actually like gave them this backbone. So to be able to speak honestly and publicly about the Winnipeg Art Gallery. So, and they eventually started working within their own community and had a lot of opportunities afterward. And they also said that they were happier now, and I see that quite a bit when I see Indigenous people that start to work within their community. They feel like they're making more of a difference. So, but it's an important document and testimony to the continued exclusion of Indigenous people, as well as a restoring of the institution in an Indigenous voice that shows both the resilience of Mattes and the symbolism of exclusion in the nation state through the institution. And I'll just have another one here in a sec.